As a Maori woman, what can we learn from countries who have recognised their Indigenous people? You know, New Zealand and Canada are frequently mentioned in this context. What do you think that really, as Australians, we should be taking out of that international experience?
So I'm Māori on my mother's side, and I'm Chinese. I come from the Chan. My family name, my father's name is Chan, Malaysian Chinese. So, he came to New Zealand and studied and met my mother in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I'm 47, so born in the 70s. That means, and at that time, Māori people were very, very much still underprivileged and underclass. So I've grown up knowing what it looks like to see this emerging political consciousness as Māori people gained more of a voice and a presence for themselves, as they became more front and centre in terms of politics and acceptance. We've always had a treaty. I mean, we've had a treaty for a long time, but you know, from very early on, it was disregarded or there were treaty breaches. And so there's been, some decades now of work of bringing the government to the table and organisations, what does it look like also to be treaty organisations. But I think it taps into something universal, which is about belonging. And I think that is one of the reasons why I was very excited to journey, to accept the invitation and go on this journey, because I do believe that, if this climate, if the racial climate changes for our First Peoples, then it's going to benefit everybody in terms of belonging.
What do you think we should be learning from other nations that have gone well before us? Because the truth of the matter is, Australia is one of the last nations to move in this way.
Yeah, I think Australia is the only successful Western democracy with a colonial history that doesn't in any way recognise Indigenous peoples in our constitution. So we're very behind. The other comparable democracies have substantive recognition of Indigenous rights in their constitutions, and they all give them forms of a voice in their affairs. So you're talking about, New Zealand, there's reserved Maori seats in Parliament, and they've got the Maori Council outside Parliament, which makes representations on Maori policy development, and there's the Watego Tribunal, which oversees treaty settlements, essentially. Canada has got recognition of Aboriginal and treaty rights in the Constitution, and there's the Assembly of First Nations, which partners with the Canadian government on policy development. In the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden and Finland, they recognise Sami rights to self-determination in the Constitution, and they have the Sami parliaments, which are essentially Sami advisory bodies, elected advisory bodies. So we've got none of that here.
What's wrong with us?
We are very, very behind, and it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because what is being proposed here is more modest than what these other countries have got. So it's not that much to ask. It's really not. So it's
the least, absolute least.
It's the least, and yet we're having a political fight about it. A pretty hardcore political fight about it. So I think there is a lot to learn from other countries, but we've got to do things in our own way, and that's precisely what the Uluru Statement has offered up, right? It's offered up a uniquely Australian solution, and the solution that they proposed is very, very well suited and in keeping with Australia's constitution. Like, it's a uniquely Australian way of solving this, and many constitutional experts would say it's constitutionally conservative for that reason, because it fits with the nature and philosophy of our constitution.